Today's guest on the Winning Teams podcast is Malorie Nicole, who hails from Charlotte in North Carolina. Now, Malorie is a really, really interesting lady. She's a coach, she's a mindset expert, and she's a subconscious programmer. And she really, really does give us some great, great ideas and tips. This is aimed at CEOs, people who lead teams, senior executives, and people in leadership roles. And what it's all about is about your mindset, and it's about your subconscious beliefs. And what you will learn during this podcast from Malorie is, how you can free your mind, which in turn will free your energy, and how you can do that for yourself and how you can do that for your team, and that will really embolden your team to perform at the highest level. So you will understand now how to break down the barriers, how to minimize stress, and the negative aspects of stress in your life. So really, really well worth listening to. If you want to get more content, then please go to my site, johnmurphyinternational.com. And there, if you go to the blog section and the podcast section, there's loads of content that will be really valuable to you as a leader, where you can go to download the 10 key traits of top business leaders, which will be available to you immediately so that you can go and enjoy. But in the meantime, sit back, sip your coffee, sip your water, relax, and enjoy the podcast interview with Malorie. Nicole, thank you so much for kind of coming along and being with us today in the Winning Teams podcast. You're really very welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
Now, listen, this will be good fun. I know that you're based in Charlotte in North Carolina, a place that I know well. And I know that you on your website, you put yourself out as a coach, a mindset expert, and a subconscious programmer. And I want to come back to each one of those and kind of delve into it. But I know that prior to that, you worked in engineering. So it's quite a jump from engineering to being a mindset expert and being a subconscious programmer. Maybe can you tell us what that journey looked like?
Yeah, to make a long story just a bit short, and in 2014, I started getting very sick. And it was unknown as to why that was happening. At the time, I had rashes all over my body. I was getting migraines every single day. I had lost a bunch of weight. I was dizzy. I just had a very large list of symptoms, the kind of list of symptoms that if you Google it, you start to get really scared. And you're going, what's going on with my body? Am I going to make it? Type of thing. And this lasted for 4 months before I had any answers at all. I was in and out of the doctor's office every single week getting blood work done. And at the time, I was working for the engineering firm. And this made it very challenging to show up and perform to my work and to my team that I was working with at the time when my body was kind of falling apart. And this really led me down a path, as dark and gloomy as all that may sound, this really led me down a path of healing, because there were some things that I didn't know about health and wellness at the time, and I didn't know that my body needed. And long story short, I have some food intolerances that had showed up in my 20s, in my early 20s, and I had to change some lifestyle habits. But really, it was eye-opening for me because my body was trying to communicate something with me that I wasn't hearing at the time, because I kept trying to fix, get the symptoms to go away, but I really wasn't seeing the root and the crust of the issue. And when I was able to go in and focus and address the root of the problem, everything went away. And that really led into an avenue of health and wellness, which I don't do health and wellness coaching anymore, but it was like a door had been opened to this whole concept of coaching and subconscious mind and mindset. And that was really the door that opened the path for my education to start to shift into what I wanted to really learn more about. Because although engineering interested me, there was all this other stuff that it was like I'd pick up a book or I'd read something online, and I just had this desire and this need to know more about what was going on with the mind and the body and health and wellness.
So did you discover as part of that that the illnesses you have, and I'm not looking to delve into the specific illnesses, but the illnesses were coming from a mindset and a subconscious? Was that, and they were manifesting themselves in that way, or was it more than that?
Some of it was, yeah. Some of it was. Some of it was food. Some of it was lifestyle. But there was a lot of healing that I also experienced on my own and my own path and journey of just some things that, some traumas that I had experienced that my body was kind of holding on to. And it was a very short-lived business, the health and wellness business, because this is actually what created an interest in me to start a health and wellness coaching business. And it was within a matter of months, John, that people started asking me for help in the mindset territory. And that wasn't what I had planned. You know, if you looked at what I had on paper and what I wanted to do, that was not part of the plan. But it was left and right, people booking calls with me and asking me for help and scheduling calls on my calendar with the mindset components. And sometimes you just have to go, okay, well, they're asking for this, so I guess I'm gonna give this a shot. And that led into more of wanting to understand the mind and wanting to understand how our mind and how our body and how all of these beliefs work. And that's led into leadership and CEO executive coaching and all kinds of things. So yeah, it really did start with my own personal growth journey that led into other things. It was not a planned, none of this was planned.
Yeah, isn't it extraordinary?
As far as what I saw.
Well, it's amazing. I think, you kind of follow step one by one, and then you kind of suddenly find yourself someplace. And very often just doing that. And I think you also were listening to yourself, listening to what was happening to your body and to in your world. And that really does help you and give you a great strength of voice to actually share that with your clients and the audience that you're dealing with. I highlighted something in the information that I saw on your site, and you talk about helping people restructure the entire way their brain process information and how they behave, resulting in better outcomes in their life, which is, yes. I just found it really interesting. How do you restructure the entire way their brain processes information? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's so fascinating how the brain works. And I'm sure you know this in a lot of the work that you do with your clients and in the leadership training that you're doing. Most of our decisions are based on our subconscious mind. So when we really look at why our behavior exists, why our habits exist, how and why we react the way that we do to certain things, we can find patterns in the way that we show up to the world and the actions that we take. And all of these patterns are not random. They're not just you are who you are because that's it. These things came from something, and they came from your subconscious mind. They came from the way that you programmed your thoughts, which led to the behaviors and how you show up every single day. And your subconscious mind is basically a filing cabinet of all of your beliefs and how you see the world and how you see yourself and how you see other people. And that lens is very custom to you. The way that you see the world is very different than the way that I see the world. Even though there might be overlap, our lenses are incredibly custom because of this subconscious programming. And studies show us that about 95 to 97% of what we do every single day connects back to this subconscious mind. So it's oftentimes things we're not even aware of, which is why the word blinders means so much to me. You know, I have blinders in my life, just like anybody else does. And because so much of our decisions and thoughts and micro decisions, because really when we look at what we're doing every day, it's a whole lot of micro decisions that we're making that lead to outcomes. It's all backed by what's on our mind and what's in this programming. And we don't often look at what is actually in that programming. We spend a lot of time future pacing and looking at how we're going to do things different instead of looking at the root and the crust of all of well, why does it exist the way that it does in the first place? And why do I make the decisions the way I do day in and day out? That's really the stuff that I help people with, is understanding kind of maybe the stuff that they don't even realize is affecting the way that they're showing up in their performance and how they're leading their teams and running their business right now in the present day.
So how do you go about getting somebody to, because I mean, you're really looking at, I mean, it's a bad way of describing it, but you're really looking at getting people to kind of rewire themselves in some way. But
Mm-hmm.
how do you go about getting people to make that shift? Because if I see the world in a certain way, then I see the
Mm-hmm.
world in a certain way. And I can't, it's very difficult for me to unknow what I know. And it's very difficult for me to know what I don't know. So how do you get me to make that shift?
Yes, that's a great question. And it really starts, for me personally, and in the work that I do, it really starts with helping people see the present day blinders that are showing up, and then asking a series of questions and connecting some dots to see where it might have come from. And it's very custom because everybody has a different.
Sorry, Malorie, just what as an
No, that's
example
okay.
of today blinder, give me an example of what you mean by that.
So I'll use a personal example because that's always best. I was someone that grew up in a household that money and stress were pretty much one and the same word. You know, we always had enough money. We always had enough money to pay for a mortgage and have food on the table and go to the beach every summer. And, you know, I didn't grow up in a super wealthy family, but we had enough. But that didn't matter as far as my learned behavior of what money meant in my life. Because what I saw was my dad, and when money came into the picture, into the conversations, it was automatically stress and frustration and fear. So his relationship was modeling fear and money as to be one and the same. Now he wasn't doing this on purpose. This is his own journey and his own story. But what I learned from that were similar concepts and a similar model. And so what I did in this is I started acting out on some things that I didn't realize were backed by this belief system that I had created, that money and fear are one and the same. So I went into college and I'm 20 years old. And a 20-year-old doesn't need to be working as much as I was working. I was picking up every shift left and right that I could. At my job at the time, I was working at a restaurant waiting tables. When you live in the United States, that's a very profitable thing to do. It's really easy to go make a couple $100s a night working at a restaurant. So in my mind, I had a belief that if I wasn't making money, I was doing something wrong. So I was taking classes, but my mind wasn't really on the classes at the time. It was on, oh, I need to be doing something. I need to be generating income. I need to insert here, whatever that thing is about money. Now, I was 20 years old and I didn't know what I know now, and there's still plenty to learn. But at the time, I had no idea that this could be shifted, and that this action that I was taking was actually coming from a belief system that I had about fear based on money. I didn't need it, John. That's the thing. Like, I had $5,000-$6,000 in my bank. I didn't have a mortgage. I had rent that was like $300 a month. I didn't need any of this stuff. And it's not bad to make money. That's not the point here. The point is that I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. And when my beliefs started to shift about my own childhood and things that I had picked up, my behavior started to change.
Right, okay.
So that's an example of how some old stuff, and I see this all the time with CEOs and leaders, and you know, I'll have clients that will come ask for help. They're bringing $20,000-$30,000 a month into their business, but they won't even look at their finances. They're terrified to even look at it. They don't even want to look at the numbers.
Isn't it fascinating? Because one of the things that I also find, and I find it through in my own work when working with teams, is, you know, and it kind of plays to the point that you're making, is that, you know, you can have a conversation that somebody says, oh, you know, the big issue or the big problem with this team is, and whatever that might be. And then you've other people in the room looking, who are members of the same team, looking at going, I don't see that, right? But they see something very different. So everybody is looking at the same thing in this situation, the team, but they're all seeing different situations or different issues that are the underlying blockage to the team being effective. And, the work is then to actually, kind of delayer that and understand exactly what it is. So I do see that happening time and time again. But I do find it fascinating the way that, you talk about it, but also you talk about mental barriers and how to remove them. Is it the same process in removing mental barriers, or is it a different process?
They're very similar, but the thing about the subconscious mind and the conscious mind is that most of the time we just can't see our mental barriers. When I've got somebody I've been working with for years in my own business and life that helps me stay on track of what I might not be seeing. And we can change the way we think, but there's always, I believe, an asset to having somebody else in our corner that can help us see the things that we're not seeing. Because with the mind, if we could do it ourselves, we would have already done it. It's not the same as looking at your arm and going, oh, I have a broken arm. I need to go to the doctor and heal and get this broken arm taken care of so that it can heal properly. With our mind, we're blocked on things that we just are blocked on because that's literally science. That's the way it works. When we're in our subconscious mind, we are not seeing the things that are blocking us. So having somebody like you come into a business and say, this is what I'm seeing. Here's how to create a radical shift, which always, if you change leadership, you end up changing business growth and profit and how much you can pay people and what you're bringing in. I mean, it evolves and changes everything by going and looking at what are the barriers, because most of the time we're just blind to it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating and be interested to hear your view on it is that the mindset or the perspective that you might have, if I'm a member of the team and I see it, to me, that's very, very real, right? But it's not necessarily logical, right? But if I'm to unblock that perspective or that perception of the team or that image that I have the team, how do I do that? Because, it's not a logical kind of way of unexplaining it to actually get it. So how do I really get that deeply rooted emotional connection that I have to that being the issue? How do I shift that? Because it's not going to be a logical explanation explaining away of the problem. It's actually going to be a different way. How do you do that? How do you actually get the subconscious and the gut and the feeling? How do you shift that?
It's deep work. It's one-on-one custom deep work. And I mean, I really believe that you hear this a lot in relationships and in marriages, and it's effective to teams as well. If you do your work, the team will perform differently. So if everybody's on board with doing their work, meaning, taking ownership of self, not being reactive to people, seeing your own spots of what you need to grow on and committing to that and showing up to that, figuring out how you might better process your emotions, all of those things, and learning about you will create a less reactive person as far as performance is concerned. And if you are less reactive, you're able to lead differently. You're able to create more open communication. Vulnerability is safe. Growth is safe. And you start really shifting the trajectory of the team operating from a place of fear and everybody at each other and everybody in this competitive state to really working together in growth and unison for a more effective growth strategy and when it comes to business terms.
And to actually make that shift, I mean, what are the tools that you use? I mean, what are the things that because they say you're not going to say, okay, you've got to think differently, because I mean, it's not going to happen. What are the tools that you actually advise and recommend to people in order for them to make the shift initially, but also then to maintain and sustain it?
So it's not exactly a tool. It's more of a process. It's more of a process. And what I do with people is I always take people through a process to start. It's a 3-month process to really go through and understand all of these things about themselves and all of the ways that they're thinking and why they're thinking what they are, because this stuff can shift really quick. I don't believe in the concept. You hear this all the time. Oh, people can't change. They are the way they are. Or you're going to be that way forever. That's just blatantly not true. And when we look at science, it shows us that over and over and over again, that people are resilient and we change really, really quickly when we allow it. And in order to go through this, yes, there definitely are tools and practices that can enhance your performance and enhance the way you show up to your business or to your corporate job or wherever you are. But really going through and working with somebody, and I'm not saying that I'm that person for everyone, because I'm certainly not. This planet is full of people that do this kind of work. Really going and saying, I'm ready to do my work. I'm ready to learn more about myself so that I can show up differently and understand where some of these things come from, is pivotal to how you show up to your business. Because what we don't see, I work with a lot of people that have been through lots of trauma and lots of crazy stories and things in their life. But then I also work with people that didn't go through a lot of trauma, that don't have crazy parents and backgrounds and history, and that stuff was not part of their timeline. But they still created beliefs about themselves that they are not even realize they're projecting in their business and in their life now. And this kind of stuff comes from, you see often, quite often, a deep-rooted relationship between pain and reaching goals. And the amount of people that are reaching their goals backed by guilt and self-sacrifice, by unworthiness, is mind-blowing. But it doesn't have to be that way. That is not the only way that we have to achieve things, or that we get to, rather, achieve things in our life. It doesn't have to be rooted by waking up every day and feeling bad about ourselves until we accomplish said thing, until we set out, getting the picture and bringing it to life and taking the action to make that happen. That does not have to be rooted by fear and guilt of self. There is another way to show up to this stuff more effectively. And until we look at those learned patterns and what your subconscious mind is actually doing, and unravel those stories for you and help you unravel those blocks so that you can create new ones, you'll keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's not your fault. This isn't pointing fingers. It's just because your brain only knows what it knows.
Mm-hmm. I think also, what you're saying, that reminds me of something that I took me a long time to learn, I'd have to say, but it was a great relief to me when I did learn it, was that, always this kind of belief, well, I will be happy when, I will be happy when I achieve that goal. I will be happy when I have the house on the hill and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that I've learned, and it's actually been something that I really do work with my clients, is that you've also, you've got to enjoy the journey. If you're not enjoying the journey, then it's telling you something about the goal.
Absolutely.
And I think you've really got to be clear about that the process to get there has got to be exciting, and you've got to enjoy it. It's not a penance to actually, to in fact do that. I want to just kind of touch back on what you're saying about, working with teams and beliefs, because, some people say, oh, well, in a team, if you set your vision and you set your strategy and you set your goals and you dole out the objectives and everybody has their list of to-dos and everybody goes off and does them, and you come back and, hey, presto, you got success. But, as we know, it's never just like that, because so much is about how you work together. It's about how you see each other. It's about how you perceive each other, how you perceive yourself in the role of the role that you play in the team. The work that you've done has been around, working with subconscious beliefs. Mm-hmm. Have you seen, the impact that has had on the teams that you work with, where you really focus in on that, where it really does bring to life the vision, the mission, the values and the goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that leadership starts with self. So if you work on your own emotional intelligence, you're going to create a different way to have relationships with people on your team. And that's going to open up space for safety. And when you open up space for safety, and that might sound a little like, what do you mean by safety? When you are an open leader, you automatically instill trust in your team. And when you instill trust in your team, that gives them permission, whether you realize you're doing it or not, with their brain, it gives them permission to show up as their whole self and operate in the best way they have the capability to at the time, which always grows because our capabilities of operation and of performance grow as we grow. But by you leading, it creates a different structure and platform of communication for those that you are helping lead. So dictatorship, a lot of teams, and I'm sure you see this, John, a lot of teams are kind of run by this dictatorship thought process of to-do lists and telling people what to do and that being enough, when we're wired for growth. The people on your team, I see this all the time. The people on your teams right now have so many gifts and things that they could bring to light and that they could bring to the business and that they could bring to the culture of how things run. And sometimes they don't get a chance to because nobody ever asks, what would you do differently? Nobody ever asks, do you have a bright idea that you've been thinking about for the past 3 months that we could change things in the office or how things are running that you've been keeping quiet? And those are some of the most pivotal things that can change businesses is the internal communication going on. There's geniuses. There are genius minds sitting within every single business. But because this dictatorship role has been taught, people that lead teams think that, or lead businesses or running businesses, CEO levels, have instilled beliefs in them that they just have to kind of tell everyone what it is their jobs are and how to perform and make sure everyone's doing it, and then that's enough. When, that is an old paradigm in my mind, and I'm sure with what you're doing, I believe that you probably think the same. It's not the most effective way. And by allowing growth for every single person on the team, that really starts with you and your own vulnerability to let everyone else shine too, because that happens a lot. We don't realize that sometimes CEOs and leaders of teams, we have our own blinders of not wanting other people to shine.
Yeah.
When it can really harm.
It is so true. And I think that one of the things that I would always advocate when working with teams, that the most important element to have and to exist and to grow in a team is psychological safety. Core of that is trust. And if there isn't psychological safety where people are free to be open, to say that they are vulnerable, they don't know, or that they feel that they can certainly challenge each other, because a high-performing team is not an easy environment to live in. It's pretty demanding because people hold each other accountable. But there is that psychological safety, that it is a safe place to be. And I think that's really what you're saying there, that to create that psychological safety is hugely important. I know that you're also a big fan of emotional intelligence, as I would be. And how do you implement emotional intelligence at work? What's been your experience of doing that, and how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, a lot of that I think and I'm sure you're doing a lot of this with the people that you're working with too. You start to shift the conversation. So in what you just said, creating that psychological safety, that starts with you. Because if you are somebody that gets irritated easily, that, automatically thinks that everything that anyone says is, you could think of a better idea or think of a better way. If you have your own blocks to effective communication, you are not bringing in the emotional side of communication that has the potential to be brought for things to happen in a more effective way. And that comes with working on the way that you process your emotions. A good example of this is I end up working with a lot of people that do not know how to address conflict. They don't know when to let people go, because that's the truth of it. Sometimes you do have to let people go in business. Sometimes it's not the best fit for you and the company, whether that's clients or contract workers or employees, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's time to say goodbye, and that's okay, because it's in your best interest and their best interest to stop letting the toxicity of the relationship continue when no longer are both parties mutually benefiting each other. So that's an example of conflict that gets avoided often. Another thing is really having hard conversations internally that need to be had. Saying, I screwed up. Can we look at this? Or telling somebody, hey, I think there might be a better way, and how to address that. If we have fear around conflict and we don't know how to process our own emotions, we will avoid it like the plague when it comes to the people that we're working with. And we'll create a bubble for ourselves and live in a box and just kind of think, oh, I hope it works out. You hear that all the time. Well, I haven't talked to them about it yet because I'm just hoping that it'll change and it'll resolve itself. Well, the likelihood of that happening in any case are very slim. They're very slim. But your ability to show up in leadership and address the hard things that need to be addressed makes it not so hard, because you're opening up safety for these conversations with other people. And learning how to approach these things from self, and learning, maybe understanding deeper into why. Why are you in a pattern of behavior that you tend to avoid conflict and tend to avoid these things? Because most of the time it comes down to emotion. You are not actually avoiding the conversation. You are avoiding the emotion that's connected to the conversation. And emotions are very short-lived. If we just address it and have the conversation, that emotion of fear has about a 90-second lifespan. So basically what we're doing when we're avoiding conflict is we're really avoiding 90 seconds of fear. Mm. But when we allow ourselves to have the conversation, the emotion shows up, it comes, we work through it really quickly, and then it goes on, and we've done the thing that's more effective for us, ourselves, the other person that's involved, and the team as a whole.
It's interesting because I think one of the things, and I've talked about it quite a number of times in recent times, and it's kind of playing back to what you're saying, is that this avoidance of conflict and the avoidance of a hard conversation, or perhaps even letting somebody go. And one of the things that I believe passionately in is that there can be a very high cost of tolerance. Now, I'm not advocating intolerance, but the things that we tolerate because we tolerate it because we don't want to have the hard conversation. But by doing that, we're actually really damaging our own brand as a leader. Because in organizations, if I tolerate underperformance over here, then why am I talking about that high performance is required? And it's one of the values that I espouse. So, and there's this conflict. Well, so now I'm saying I'm saying one thing, but I'm doing something completely different. And I think that, when we look at what we tolerate, we've got to be very conscious about the things that we tolerate, because what is the message that we're giving? And there are some things that we shouldn't tolerate. But
Absolutely.
I think it does go back to being, as you say, to know yourself, which is part of the emotional intelligence, which is a huge part of kind of a leadership and managing and leading people and leading yourself. Indeed, you talk about how to shift the stress epidemic, and stress is always kind of given a kind of a bad rap, and of course the truth is that there's an element of stress is actually quite healthy. But if it tips over, then it does become damaging. How do you suggest that we all manage that negative stress that can enter our lives?
Yeah, I think that it starts with really looking at what are the stressors and understanding why they show up. Because oftentimes, I see this often, John, there are businesses that I work with, and the CEOs or leaders of the teams they'll come and they'll say, these are the top 3 things stressing me out. And my question then becomes to them, why are you still doing these 3 things if these are the 3 things that are stressing you out as much as they are? Where along the line has there been a lack of permission to say, oh, I need to get someone else to be in charge of this part of the business, or, oh, I need to outsource this piece, or, oh, I need to, give this to somebody else on the team. A lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to really create structures in our schedule and energy enhancing things that we actually enjoy doing. And when we look at what is your day-to-day, what's on your to-do list, what's your role in the company, there are a lot of energy depleters, I call them, things that so many people are stuck in because they just haven't even given themselves permission to look at what is it that you want to do? What are your unique gifts? What is the thing that you bring to the team or the culture that you're great at? And this doesn't mean that you can get away with just not doing the hard work. That's not at all what I'm suggesting, because business requires a lot of hard work. It does. But there can be a more effective way to running these things. And a lot of the stress just comes from not allowing ourselves to be honest about what our needs are and what's really great for ourselves. And this all goes, I keep saying it goes back to self, but I truly believe that we're not selfish enough. The word selfish has a bad rep because we're just told that, we can't do that. We can't look at that. We're bad people if we do. But by filling your cup, you fill everyone else's cup. And if your cup is empty, you can expect that your clients, the people that pay you money for your services in your business, they're not going to get the best of you. If you don't give the best of you, nobody else is either. So looking at your stressors and understanding where it comes from and really saying, what are the energy enhancers? What are the energy depleters? Am I taking care of myself? Sometimes stress is connected to just a lack of sleep. Sometimes stress is connected to a big bag of beliefs that someone hasn't addressed, that they're carrying around with them, and they're walking around the world with a victim mindset that they're not seeing, and everyone's out to get them. It could be various things. It's not necessarily one or the other, and it can be different things at different times. But when we do not look at how we're performing and why, we create a lack of performance in the entire way that our businesses can function.
It's interesting. I'm just smiling to myself because I just had a coaching conversation earlier today with the CEO of a business, and he was talking about that he was just so completely stressed at this moment in time. And when we dug into it, he was talking about, oh well, yesterday I was doing this, that, and the other. And then when he was talking about it, he said I just don't have the time to focus on what I'm doing. And then when we really dug into it, a big chunk of the day was spent doing something that he actually enjoys doing, but it's not his job. It's actually somebody else's job. And he was down doing their job, which can't be good for them, but he wasn't doing his own job. And yet he was causing his own stress by not actually being really clear about what was important in his role. And he was kind of dropping down to do something that he actually did enjoy doing in his previous role, but that's not his job right now. So I think you're right. It's about the choices that we make, and it's understanding the choices. Malorie, it's a good time to wrap up because I've gone over the time that I said I would take up for you. But before we do wrap up and we find out where people can get in touch with you, this has been great. It's been great fun. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. But, two questions I ask everybody. One is a book that you would recommend and why.
One of the first books that really helped me look at mind and understanding why we think the way we think and understanding myself differently is The Big Leap. Are you familiar?
Yes, I am indeed.
I absolutely love that book. Yep, I absolutely love it. I think it's a great go-to for anybody that's looking to understand more about themselves and why they behave the way they do.
Absolutely. The second question is daily rituals. Do you have them, and what are they, and what do they do for you?
I have a collective basket of daily rituals, but it's not the same thing every single day. So I know that I have an allotted amount of time. I am a long morning person. I spend a couple hours in the morning before I go to work, spending time on myself. That could be journaling, meditating, going for a walk, different things and different tools and modalities that I use. But I find personally with me, if I do the same thing every single day, I actually get a little bit bored. So I mix things up just a little bit.
Very good. I think that's a great idea. I think that, the habit has got to be meaningful, and the habit doesn't necessarily mean that you do exactly the same thing every day. So
exactly. That took me a little while to figure that out. And the habit for me is long mornings. Long mornings are very effective for me, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same exact thing that I'm doing in that time period before I show up to work.
Because I think that, the whole purpose, as far as I'm concerned, of daily rituals is that it sets you up for the day and it enriches you. And the fact that you can just mix and match it and do different things every day, I think that's perfectly fine. Listen, this has been a real joy, Malorie. Thank you so much. Where can people get in touch with you? We'll have everything in the show notes, but listening now, where can they get in touch with you?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is abundantlyclearpodcast.com. And if you are somebody that's wondering about maybe where your beliefs come from, and if you're sabotaging yourself a little bit, or if you're just a little more stressed than you want to be and you want to figure out why, you can send me a message on there. And I also have the podcast show that you can tune into, and that's found on any iTunes, Spotify, any major platforms.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming along today. It's been a real joy. I see the Christmas tree behind you. You'll probably be taking that down in the future.
It will be. It'll be taken. Yeah, this will probably be aired a couple weeks into January. So the Christmas tree will be down by January 1st.
Listen, enjoy it while it's still there. So listen, I will talk to you soon, and I'd love to come back and maybe we could do another one of these. It's been really enjoyable.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.